What I would have told probably my younger self is less is not more. More is probably just enough, honestly. There's so many risks to underfueling, but essentially no risks to overfueling as an athlete. And I also think just to be very mindful, no, like intuitive eating, but while also being mindful of what your body actually needs.
Hello, and welcome to the October 18th, 2024 edition of the TriDoc podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Sankoff, the TriDoc, an emergency physician, triathlon coach, and multiple Ironman finisher, coming to you as always from beautiful, sunny Denver, Colorado. We are just 1 week away from the 2024 World Championship Ironman race in Kona, Hawaii. And I think that it is fair to say that the excitement is building around what can only be described as a stacked field of athletes. This year, 56 men will be lining up on the start line in the Big Island, and as always, it is a deep and talented field. The 2023 Ironman World's Champion is returning in the form of Sam Laidlaw. He, of course, won the race in Nice last year and undoubtedly will be one of many of the key athletes to watch once again. Laidlaw finished second in Kona in 2022 before his breakthrough win last year when he led the field in Nice off of the bike and then held off some really strong runners on his way to his victory. Patrick Lang was one of those strong runners, and we'll be mentioning him amongst some of the favorites who are coming back to challenge Laidlaw in Kona once again. Laidlaw has had a kind of quiet 2024, almost didn't even requalify, but did manage because of a quirk of some referee rulings to be able to get his slot and be back in Kona to defend his championship. Some of the other men that are going to be considered favorites include a returning champion in the form of Gustav Iden, the 2022 Ironman World Championship, who's really not been heard from very much in both 2023 and 2024, leading to some questions about what kind of form he's going to be bringing into this race. He had been kind of preparing himself for the Olympics, and that didn't really pan out. He had some personal loss in the form of his mother passing away, and because of that, hasn't really been participating in many races. However, one can only assume that if he is showing up to start, he is going to be in probably pretty good shape and probably going to be one of the ones that we have to consider as a favorite heading into this event. Christian Blumenfeld, another former world champion, he won the race in 2021 when it was held in St. George, Utah. He, of course, is also the Olympic gold medalist from Tokyo in 2020. He also dedicated much of his 2023 and 24 to the Olympic Games in Paris. He did show up there to defend his medal, but ended up just off the podium. But he demonstrated that despite making most of his focus short course racing, he returned to long course racing after the Olympics and distinguished himself quite well in both the half and full Ironman distances. So once again, another Norwegian looking to be primed to go. And after teasing a consideration of moving to just dedicated pro cycling, he has confirmed that that's not going to happen. He's going to be a triathlete for the immediate and probably long-term future. Patrick Longa, I mentioned him as a threat to Sam Laidlaw on the run. He is a two-time Kona champion, having won the race in 2017 and 18, and is known, of course, for his lightning fast marathon. He has had some recent injuries over the past couple of seasons, but he's been really in top form this year. And if he paces himself right coming off the bike, he is always a threat if he's within 10 or 15 minutes of the lead coming off the transition two. Lionel Sanders is, of course, a perennial fan favorite and returns to Kona after not participating in Nice last year. He brings with him his usual grit, determination, and never give up attitude. Despite being a runner-up in Kona in 2017, he's yet to really take the top spot and has not really been a threat in his last couple of appearances because of the deficit that he gives up coming out of the water. However, he has made some pretty significant improvements to his swim and made him a very serious contender in both 70.3 and Ironman races against some of the top swimmers and bikers in the race. So we have to wonder, is 2024 going to be a breakthrough year for this very popular and hard-fighting Canadian? But the list doesn't just stop there and is honestly too extensive for me to get into in this monologue. Could Trevor Foley, for example, exert the kind of dominance the way he showed in Lake Placid? What about Kona first-timer Jackson Laundrie? How about Matt Hansen, whose name is perennially mentioned but never seems to get that breakthrough in Kona that we hope that he is going to bring? One thing is for sure, it's going to be an incredible event to watch, even if the broadcast is likely to be as uninspiring as always. But it's definitely going to be one that I'll be looking forward to and will definitely be keeping an eye on throughout that day on October 26th. What do you think? Are you excited for the race? Do you have a pick for the podium? I hope that you'll let me know. Drop your comments in the private TriDoc podcast Facebook group and see what others think as well. If you aren't already a member, I hope that you will consider becoming one. You can search for TriDoc Podcast on Facebook, answer the 3 easy questions. I'll gain you admittance, and you can join the conversation there. On the show today, Juliet, Hochman, and I are going to answer a listener question about body composition and performance. Now, this is a pretty delicate subject, so we invited our friend and frequent contributor Alex Larson from Alex Larson Nutrition to join us and help us tease out the important points that athletes can take away from the evidence on this topic and that coaches like myself and Juliet can use to handle conversations with their athletes when this comes up. And that discussion is going to be coming up in just a couple of minutes. Later, I am joined by up-and-coming age group triathlete and soon-to-be professional, Maia Watson. Maia has had a stellar 2024 season as part of the TTL development team and recorded her first overall wins as a woman at the 70.3 Victoria and 70.3 Oregon races. She talks to me about what it has been like finding that success and where she goes from here. And that's going to be coming up in just a little while later. I also want to take a moment to make a quick announcement about a new enhancement for this podcast. After several people have asked and kind of cajoled and prompted me to take this podcast to video, I am finally making the effort to do so and will be offering a video version of the podcast on my TriDoc Coaching YouTube channel. So if hearing my voice is just not enough for you, if you prefer to see my mug, along with that of Juliet and all of my guests that I speak with, you can finally do so. Search for TriDoc Coaching, and this time it is 2 words. TriDoc is one, coaching is the second. Look for that on YouTube, and you can subscribe to the channel so that you can be informed when new episodes are released. It's my goal that all future episodes of the podcast will be on there, but until I get the workflow completely dialed in, it might be a little bit uneven at the start, so bear with me. And as usual, I definitely want your feedback. Is this something that you want? Is this something that you enjoy? Is this something that you don't really need? Whatever it is, I definitely want to hear from you. So I hope that you will take a look. I will put a link to the YouTube channel in the show notes. And of course, that link will also be on my Instagram feed in the link tree, which can be found in my bio. Again, my YouTube channel is TriDoc Coaching. It's 2 words, TriDoc and Coaching. And now, before we get to the medical mailbag, as always, I want to take a moment to thank all of my Patreon supporters of this podcast who've decided that for about the price of a cup of coffee, they would sign up to support this program, and in doing so, get access to bonus interviews and other segments that come out about every month or so. The most recent of those bonus segments came out just last week and featured a detailed medical segment on some new research that shows that muscle efficiency in cycling is unaffected by aging. That was a pretty surprising finding and had some important implications for all of us as we train and race into our older age groups. That bonus episode and others like it are available on a private feed that is available to all of my subscribers. Plus, for North American subscribers who sign up at the $10 per month level of support, they receive a special thank you gift in the form of a BOCO TriDoc podcast running hat shown right here on the video if you're watching in YouTube. So visit my Patreon site today at patreon.com/TriDoc podcast and become a supporter so that you too can get access and maybe this cool gift as well. As always, I thank you in advance just for considering. It's time again for the medical mailbag, that section of the program when I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Juliet Hochman. Juliet, how are you doing this morning?
I am great. Just fresh in from a little run myself. Great way to start the morning. Thanks. Beautiful fall morning here in Oregon. How about you?
I am doing well. I can't say it's beautiful. The leaves have changed. It's gorgeous. This is a beautiful time of year. It just always gets me a little sad because I know what's coming.
I know it's
But
dark.
anyway,
It's dark out there right now.
it's not as bad, however, for both of us as it's going to be for our guest who's joining us on the medical mailbag today, who is living in a much more dire winter-esque kind of place. And
The frozen
that is
tundra.
Alex Larson. Alex, a friend of the podcast who's been a guest of ours several times, is joining us because we have a question that's very pertinent to her. Alex, welcome back to the TriDoc podcast.
Thanks for having me back.
Alex, before we get started, I understand you're launching your own podcast in the near future. Do
I
you want to take a
am.
moment
It's
to just
gonna.
tell us about that?
Yeah, it's called Endurance Eats. So it's all on endurance nutrition topics. And it launches in January 2025. So working on recording some episodes, getting that ready to go. It'll be in seasons. So I'll have a season one. I'll have like 12 to 15 episodes that first season. I'll take a little break because you guys know I got 3 young kids at home. So I can't like guarantee I'm always going to have content all year round. And then we'll have a season 2 come out later on in 2025.
Ooh, I
All
am
right,
writing
that's
this
fantastic.
down right now. Jeff knows I'm not very good with podcasts, but Endurance Eats, I got it. January 2025. We'll give that a
Yes,
listen.
the trailer's already out, so you can already subscribe and follow. So when it launches, you'll be able to catch the episodes.
Awesome.
All right,
Great.
I'll put a link to that in the show notes, and we will, of course, announce that when Alex goes live with it in the new year. But for now, we have a listener question to answer. Juliet, what are we tackling today? Why is Alex joining us for
I
this
know this
question?
is going to be an interesting topic. So this question comes from one of our listeners, Justin Raphael. Thank you so much, Justin. It's always better when we get questions from our listeners rather than trying to make them up ourselves. And he asks, is there an ideal body composition for athletes to consider striving for in order to optimize their performance? And then he goes on to ask, what is the accuracy of the different modalities by which body fat percentage is measured? So this is a topic that I know Jeff and I speak about a lot offline as coaches and how to help athletes with this question when it comes to us. So I'm excited about this discussion today. So where are we going to start, Jeff?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And that's why I wanted Alex here, because it is a tough one. It's so fraught. And I want to take a moment to thank my intern, Nina Takashima, who did the research for this. We had a really interesting conversation when she came back to me with what she found. And we have to be really careful. We have to tread carefully. We know that nutrition in athletes is a fraught conversation. That's why I wanted Alex here to help us out with it. And we also know that there is this really fine line. If you watched much of the Olympics this year, you spent any time watching track athletes, you no doubt saw that there was a very common body type. And that body type among the sprinters tended to be very ripped, very muscular men and women. And amongst the middle to long distance athletes, it tended to be incredibly lean people, not much muscle, and certainly not much body fat. And that was the common theme across any sport of any elite athlete, was the absence of any kind of defining body fat. And there is evidence that kind of supports this notion that reducing body fat does result in improvements in performance across different kinds of sports. There is a paper that came out in 2023, and it was developed by a subset of, or a subgroup of the IOC consensus panel that works on relative energy deficiency in sport. So interesting. This is a group that actually worked to define REDS and continues to do work on nutrition in sport and continues to come up with recommendations. And they reviewed the literature and actually showed that it's true. If you gain in lean mass, you will show an improvement in your ability to perform in just about all sports. You will show, and this is in measurable metrics such as peak average power output in cycling, sprint performance, work economy, improved jump skills, and even performance across team sports. And there is a negative association with performance variables such as race time and average speed with increasing body fat percentage. So these things are definitely linked. Unfortunately, there is an abundance of literature that shows that amongst athletes who strive to work for these kinds of body composition goals, they get into trouble. Hang on. They get into trouble if they go too far, but there is a ceiling, let's put it that way. Running and body fat, walking the tightrope of optimum performance is another paper that we found. And in this paper, basically, in measuring body fat levels across different kinds of runners, it was found that men and women were running levels of body fat that are not seen in normal human beings. Basically, levels less than 10% in men, less than 15% in women. And this was almost universally associated with significant calorie deficits. And these calorie deficits were seen during the preparatory and competition phases, which is pretty amazing. And we're going to bring Alex in here in just a short bit. But Alex has spoken with us on this podcast numerous times about the importance of fueling for performance. And I was just shocked that these elite athletes were running huge calorie deficits, trying to make up for their calorie deficits by eating low carbohydrates, low proteins, and high fat content. And despite this, running as much as 20% calorie, 20 to 30% calorie deficits in order to keep their lean body mass up and their body fat percentage down. And what are the consequences of this? We know about RED-S and the female athlete triad, which are both significant health issues, but there is another health issue that was brought up, and that was the issue of immune function, because it has been seen that when men are running at a body fat level of less than 10% and women less than 15%, their immune function is adversely affected and they put themselves at risk for having issues related to recurrent illnesses related to either viral, bacterial, or even fungal infections. So these are all important things that need to be taken into consideration. And there was also a ceiling in terms of if you dropped your body fat percentage too far, you actually had adverse performance. And there was one group of athletes who seemed to do particularly well with normal levels of body fat, normal being for women as much as 30%. That was the ultra runners. People who were running really long distance, we see, and if you look at an ultra runner, you look at some of the women who are performing really well, they look like normal women.
Yeah.
A lot of the men look like normal men. And that's not surprising when you are performing those long kinds of distance events. You generally performing at a level, zone 1, zone 2, where you're actually metabolizing fat as opposed to carbohydrates. So it's not that unusual that they would run more normal levels of body fat. We're going to talk about one athlete who's gone through this journey and had some success, someone I know quite well. But before we do that, Alex, I know that you face this kind of conversation frequently. And I know that you get inundated because of your popularity on social media. A lot of women see the Olympics. They see what these athletes look like, and then they see your feed and they come to you.
Let me challenge that, though. I do feel like at this Olympics, we were embracing women of all types of bodies. There was a lot of coverage on like the power lifters or the shot putters or discus throwers and the variety of body types and how these are all elite athletes and they all come in different shapes and sizes. So I do feel like I saw a little bit different story on the Olympics just from that aspect. But yes, like these are elite athletes. They have mastered their craft. They are very strong men and women. And I feel like there is definitely, if you look at the marathoners, they're going to be a much more longer, leaner body type versus like the sprinters that are going to have a more powerful, stockier stature. Same thing with swimmers. You look at your sprinters versus your more longer distance, you might see some varying levels there. You're going to have like different ideal body types, and that's okay. And like also keep in mind that no matter if you take everyone in the world and we all ate exactly the same and we all trained exactly the same, we're still all going to look different. We're all going to have genetically different body types, and that's okay. So I think that's also a really good approach to looking at body composition as well. It's not just about the body fat percentage. I think we also have to look at the genetic makeup of people as well and what we're going to see in performance too. There's a lot of factors other than just body comp.
Yeah, and I'd like to also point out that when you're looking at something like the Olympics, those athletes there's a huge genetic component. Those athletes, like the powerlifters, could not have been rowers. The rowers could not have been gymnasts. Genetics plays a lot into what you gravitate towards from an early age, where you're going to
Yes.
find success as an athlete
Yeah.
at that
Yeah. I mean,
elite
Simone
level.
Biles is what, 4'11". She's
Right.
just tiny, but just absolutely so incredibly powerful in what she's able to do.
And I'm glad you brought gymnastics up as an example. I remember as a kid watching gymnastics, and there were these little tiny pixie 14 and 15-year-olds who hadn't even seen puberty yet. And
I
now
feel
we
like they're
progress into,
curvier this year.
oh, they're amazing.
I love this
I love it.
change in just what we're seeing in
I know
the
we are
women
no
that are
longer
competing.
looking at Nadia Comaneci, right? We're looking at Simone
Yes.
Biles, who is in her 20s, actually late 20s now, and all of those athletes appear to be in their 20s, older, stronger, just so much better than it was. And I think that's a lot to do with increased, nutrition and less sort of premium put on how they looked watching these little girls throw themselves around the gym. So I was really encouraged by that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we totally diverted there, Jeff. I don't even remember
Sorry,
what your
Jeff.
original question was.
I mean, I'm not going to disagree. I think that if we look across the track and field sports, you're right. If we look across weightlifting, we look across different sports. But if we bring it back to middle distance, if we bring it back to high jump, pole vault, the men and women look the same. They're very lean. They're very
absolutely.
small. And there's literature to show that there's a reason for that. So I bring it back to the question, which is athletes who see that, who then look at themselves in the mirror and think, oh, I need to look like that to do better. You must get that question all the time.
I do
know
get it
you
a lot.
do.
Yeah.
So,
a good chunk of our athletes.
What do you do?
Yes. So formerly I used to be like, let's just focus on fueling you better, fueling you for performance, and see if it's like just a byproduct. That's where I originally was in my mindset around it. But over the past year and a half, I have had a shift. And in part because I get it. As a mom of 3 kids now, I'm on my own little body composition journey. I'm no longer planning on ever getting pregnant again in my life. Thank God. And I'm like, okay, now I'm like in this whole new phase where I'm like, I'm not going to have this pregnancy break I'm going to have to take. I want to get back into a level of fitness. I have some like athletic goals for myself. Like I want to return back to that. And so I'm on this body composition goal and I can do that. Like I want to honor that for other people as well who have that interest. However, if they come to me and they say, hey, Alex, I want to lose some weight, I am going to ask some questions and make sure that we can, one, do this in the healthiest way possible. Understanding, okay, when you say you want to lose some weight or you want to get leaner, do you have some numbers in mind? Where are you at right now? What's your weight history been over your lifetime? Do you have a history of eating disorders? What's your current relationship with food? What's your current relationship with your body? What's your training like right now? What do you have coming up for a race schedule? I'm going to ask a lot of questions so that I understand, okay, is this weight goal realistic for this person? Is our timeline realistic? Are they prepared to do this the right and healthy way in slow and steady body composition changes over time so that we can prevent low energy availability. We can prevent REDs. We can prevent immune function being compromised. Because I find it's not necessarily just body fat percentage influence. I find low energy availability also can impact immune health. I want to keep people like being able to still function as a normal human being, go for their long run on Saturday and still have energy the rest of the day. I want them to prevent being injured. I want to do everything that I can for them to succeed. And most importantly, create an eating pattern for them that is sustainable. Like this is not like a quick fix, restrictive diet kind of thing. This is something that we can create them to just eat better, feel better, and as just an like part of the process, they're seeing their body composition improve.
Yeah, I think the sustainability part is huge. It should never be about losing weight for an event or just about losing weight so that you can perform for something. I think it needs to be more of a long-term process. Like when you say a timeline, what kind of timeline do you look at? And for a
Yeah.
healthy weight loss?
Yeah. So I've had some athletes that like will come to me in May and they've got Ironman Chattanooga at the end of September. And they're like, I want to lose 15 pounds by the time Chattanooga comes. I'm like, I don't know if I can get you there. That sounds like some pretty rapid weight loss. I can't guarantee you those types of results. I was like, but we could maybe shoot for half of that. And then after your race, you can work in the off season on the rest of that. And that's what ended up happening with that particular athlete. Or other times we have athletes who really do well in the program and they see 20 pounds weight loss in 4 or 5 months. We've got a couple that are graduating right now. We have a cyclist that he's down 20, 22 pounds in 5 months with Mary. And great. Like we're so excited for them and very seamless process with them. No issues with low energy availability, like potential for reds. We have those situations where we see really great success. But on average, like 1 to 2 pounds is the typical recommended based off of research safe weight loss. Sometimes we'll see
1 to 2
pounds
per month, per week.
Per week would be the fastest that we would want to see weight come down. Sometimes we'll see half a pound a week. Or like with women, this is what I find even with myself, is based off my cycle. Like in that luteal phase, the weight loss will like plateau. And then as soon as I get into my follicular phase, the weight will drop down 2 pounds like within a couple days. And
water thing.
Yeah, it's just a water fluctuation thing. And so you have to work with that too with female athletes and their cycle as well.
Does it matter if the athlete is coming to significantly more overweight? If an athlete has a higher body fat percentage, is more overweight, can you tolerate a larger weight loss early?
What we might expect to see is maybe initially they see the weight come down a little bit quicker and then it'll steady out a little bit more consistently. I had one athlete who lost about 22, 23 pounds and she wasn't even really weighing herself. She just knew that she was losing weight because her clothes were fitting differently and she was having to go down sizes and clothing. And then eventually she went to the doctor and actually got weighed in and she was like, oh, wow, I've actually lost, 22 pounds. And for her, it was pretty steady, but she really revamped her diet within a couple months and built some nice consistency with that. That's the thing. You got to put in the work in order to see those results too. Like you have to be in that mindset of, okay, yeah, I'm ready to make some changes with my nutrition. I'm ready to put in like that commitment to myself. And like we do tend to see like a really nice transformation for them.
Yeah, eating healthy definitely takes a lot of work and a lot of preparation and a lot of logistics. It is
especially initially. The change initially can be very difficult.
Mhm.
But what I find is when they practice it over and over time, it gets easier.
100%.
And then it doesn't feel like as much work. But you have to go through that zone of suck initially. A
lot of planning.
Where it feels like you're putting a lot more thought and planning and work into it. But once it starts to feel routine, that's when the magic really happens.
Yeah, 100%. Do you require that your athletes who have stated weight loss goals come to you with certain testing like body fat percentages, which you're working with up front so you can track the data as you move along?
Some of them do come with that. Some of them do not. I'm very open to what works for them because sometimes I feel like we get too focused on the numbers and it can be really harmful to their mental health. Like I have athletes who are like weighing themselves like multiple times a day. I'm like, okay, this is not healthy. You are basing your mood on what the number says, and that's not fair to you. So we'll make like some good food behaviors and you just feeling good and celebrating that before we actually focus on any numbers. So sometimes we'll have athletes that will have had a DEXA scan or an in-body test, or they have a Garmin scale with that says all the stats of the body fat percentage. And so we see a wide variety, and I don't have a set rule of what we expect from them.
Mm-hmm. I want to get to those ways of measuring body fat, but I just had one more question, and that was, if the athlete is smart about how they're doing this, about how they're changing their body composition, does it always, the way the literature suggests, does it always translate into performance improvements in your experience?
I don't know if I'd say always, because there's a lot of factors that go into performance, but general, yes, most will see improvements in just how much easier the workout feels because they don't have to. And we try very hard to make sure that we preserve the muscle and strength. Because when athletes come to me and they say, I want to lose weight, I'm like, okay, what you really mean is you want to lose the excess body fat and you want to maintain the muscle and strength. We don't want to see their power drop on watts on the bike or something like that. So typically, yes, we will see performance improvements, but it also depends on, okay, how are they training? Sometimes their coaches are overtraining them and we have to talk with them about, hey, we need you to take some rest days and recoveries. Every situation we see is unique. So I can't say always, but I would say most of the time we see performance improvements, which you have. I know you
right.
have.
So I'm going to bring my N of one. I
Yeah.
mentioned the athlete, and that was me. I decided that I felt like I was racing against people who looked different than I did. And it's not like I was overweight by any stretch, but in a discussion with my coach, the point came up of one of the ways that I could potentially improve performance was to change my body composition. And so I made the decision to work with Alex. Actually, I like to call her Alex's minion, Mary.
Yes. So I have a team, and I have Hannah and Mary on my team. And because Jeff, you and I have a friendship, I felt it would be best for you to work with Mary on my team.
Right.
That way, it felt better for you to work with her.
Great. I got to meet now. So now I know Mary as well. So it's been a very successful relationship in that I lost 10 pounds of pretty much body fat. And my performance is definitely, it's not like I'm significantly faster, but like you say, everything's easier. And as I told my wife was like, well, I don't get it. Like, why? And I said, just imagine you have a backpack of books you're carrying. That's 10 pounds. And then you put that backpack down. You know how much easier it is to go upstairs. That's how I feel. I feel like my running is that much easier because I'm carrying around 10 pounds less. And hills, obviously.
Would you say, do you have a pace difference that you've noticed over the past few months since like August?
I will say that I raced Tri-Cities, which was 10 pounds lighter than I raced 70.3. I raced that one 10 pounds lighter than Oregon. I guess the half marathon there was pretty similar.
They're very similar. Yeah. So for people who don't, that's about a 2-month difference between 70.3 Oregon and 70.3 Washington. And the run courses are, I would say, identical. They're flat and fast.
Yeah. So I ran the same, but the bike course was significantly harder in Tri-Cities. So I would consider that having run better because the Oregon bike course was not as difficult as the Tri-Cities bike course. And I had similar bike splits. I think I was a little bit faster in Oregon, not much. And then I ran about the same time at both races. And so I feel like my overall performance was better at Tri-Cities because it was a much harder bike course. And I was able to hit those hills at Tri-Cities much easily because I weighed less. And then I was able to run quite efficiently and quite effectively. So overall, I feel like my performance did improve with a different body composition. And I'm looking forward to see how it goes in Worlds in December, which was really my target race for doing this in the first place. So and then after that, of course, it's the holiday season and we'll see how sustainable it is.
I was going to say, I know that Jeff, you've always had this sort of annual periodicity of your weight, right? And at Christmas time, you find that extra challenge of the wine and the cheese and the crackers. And so
I've already started those conversations with Mary.
Okay. That's like our favorite.
That's right. I'm gonna shift gears.
Mary and I both love candy corn. I know that's like a love it or hate it. Like
I know.
We love like carb loading our athletes with candy corn.
I want to make sure we cover something important in the remaining time that we have. But just before we do that, I want to touch very quickly on the accuracy of the different ways of measuring body composition, because that was the second part of Justin's question. So there are a variety of ways of doing this, and we found evidence in the literature that touched on all of these. The oldest way of doing this was just measuring skin folds with calipers. That is, I don't even know if that's done anymore. It probably is done in some places. It's very low tech. They basically measure the thickness of the skin folds, I think, in 6 or 7 different places on the body. And they have these calculations that help determine what body fat is. Essentially, it's completely unreliable. It was the only way that they used to have to do it.
Traumatizing
and so they did
to have done on your body.
I remember we did that run for the Olympics. It was just like, oh God. Yeah. Right, I remember.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's not great. Anyways, don't do it. It's not worth it. It's traumatizing and it's not very accurate. So don't do it.
It's
Another
plus or
way of
minus
doing it,
7% or something like that.
Yeah.
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 Another way of doing it is something called a body pod, which I'm not familiar with, but basically it uses like air displacement and hydrostat. I don't even. It's
I've
a
done it.
proprietary technology. Oh, so tell
Yeah,
us
Bod
about it.
Pod. It's funny. You step into this spaceship looking like thing,
Hmm.
and they do all of this stuff with air and water, and bang, you come out with a number. Anyway, it was interesting.
It's fast, it's easy,
Hmm.
it's very nice. There are some downsides to it. It's not particularly accurate. It can be claustrophobic for some people, and it doesn't give you much in the way of regional body composition. It just gives you a total number. So it's not bad in terms of its accuracy. It's just it's not great, and it does have some downsides. The scales you mentioned them, Alex, a little earlier. The Garmin scale. I have one of them as well. I have the Withing scale. They use bioimpedance. Basically, you put your feet on either side of the scale. There's a very small current that's passed through your body, and then a calculation is made to determine the resistance to that current in order to determine how much water, how much fat. And the problem is those scales, depending on how much lean mass you have, they can be wildly inaccurate. Now, some of the scales have a way to change the calculation if you are an athlete. They don't they don't define what that is, but basically, supposedly, if your lean mass is higher than a certain amount, you should make sure that your scale is calculating you as an athlete. But the problem is, how do you know what your lean mass is if you're using the scale to determine that? So the long and the short of it is I was using my Withing scale and it was calculating these wild body fat percentages. And then I turned it onto the athlete mode when I found out it had it. And suddenly I was getting numbers that made a lot more sense. So they can be, they're still not crazy accurate, but they're useful for tracking because the inaccuracy tends to be the same over time.
Consistent.
Yeah, consistently inaccurate. So if you want to track, the scales are useful for tracking, but the actual number you're getting is probably limited value. And then finally, the DEXA scan is the most accurate way. It is something like 98, 99% accurate. So it is a very accurate means. The downside is it uses radiation, low power x-rays in order to determine what's going on. It is also less accurate if you have very low body fat percentage because it has a harder time discriminating the body fat from lean mass.
Hmm.
But for most people, anywhere between 10% and up, or I think it's 12% and up body fat, then you will get very accurate numbers from a DEXA scan. It's probably not something you want to be doing repeatedly because they cost a lot and because there is still, even though it's low, there is still radiation. The DEXA scan was something that used to be done for bone
Yeah, that's what I thought
mineralization
it
for
was. Bone
women.
density. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a bone density thing. And now, as always happens in a capitalistic healthcare system, they figured out another thing to make money off of it. And so it's being used for body fat. It's marketed pretty aggressively for that. And I would tell people, unless this is something you're like Alex says, weighing yourself twice a day, right? Do you really need to have a DEXA scan every 5 weeks or so? Probably not. Okay, I do want to move to, I wanted to spend the rest of the time we have available to answer two really important questions for coaches. Juliet and I both work with a lot of athletes, and we have athletes who come to us not infrequently and ask the question, should I lose weight? That is a fraught conversation to have as a coach, especially if you're not trained like you are, Alex, as a nutritionist. I feel like as a physician, I actually have some knowledge in this area and some expertise that I can help my athletes with, but I have been very wary of engaging in this conversation with my female athletes. I'm much more open to discussing it with my male athletes. And I wonder if that's not the correct approach because I've had some female athletes come to me who I know they the answer to the question is yes, not just for performance, but also for health reasons. It would be beneficial to lose some weight, and I could probably help you to a certain degree. But I'm wary to have the conversation. So, what's your advice to coaches, both men like me, women like Juliet, who have athletes who come to them with that conversation so that they can best help their athletes and avoid the pitfalls that you have alluded to already? Yeah, right?
Still not sure how I want to
Stumped
answer
her.
this. I've had some athletes come to us and they say, hey, my coach really wants me on race day to be X number of pounds. That's what they really want me to be on race day. And I'm like, where did that number even come from? It's they literally just pulled it out of their butt. I'm like, that just makes me really frustrated that they're doing that, especially because we had to explain to them, in order for you to be that number on race day, we would have to have you be like 5-6 pounds below that, because when we carb load you, you're going to see some water retention. And so
I think the three of us will agree that it is wholly inappropriate for a
Yes.
coach to
so
wait.
inappropriate.
It
And
just
if
gives
you're
me
an
the
athlete,
oof.
So then,
yeah,
so
if
that's
you're an
why I'm like,
athlete, if you're an athlete listening to this and you have a coach who's stipulating a race weight, you need to reevaluate that. You need to have a conversation with your coach. But
And by
that's
the way,
not
this
what
is
we're.
this is from high school right up through age
I
grouping
don't
to the
care how
top.
old you
No
are.
coach.
So
Yeah, no
inappropriate.
coach should be
Yeah.
giving you a number. That is not professional.
Yeah.
I want to also say, in my experience with my coach, when we talked about weight, the conversation was couched as, you, Jeff, are a 57-year-old man. I'm pretty comfortable having this conversation with you because I know you're not going to have an eating disorder kind of response to
Yeah.
my having this conversation with you. And the conversation was, I don't need you to lose weight. The conversation was, have you ever considered changing the way you eat in order to change your body composition? Which I think is a reasonable way for a coach to approach that conversation with an athlete. But my interest in this specific, in asking you this, Alex, is what do we as coaches do when an athlete comes to us?
Yeah. I would say, do you want to lose some weight? What are your thoughts on it? I would put it back on them and see where they're at. Because if it's on their mind, if it's something they're interested in, then I would refer them out to a sports dietitian to work on that. There are some sports dietitians that aren't even really touching body composition, and I think that's unfortunate, because I feel like it's our job to help these athletes navigate this while they're training, to do it in the healthiest way possible.
No, I appreciate that response, because I've seen sports dietitians certainly who don't touch the body composition piece and are focused completely on fueling performance, and
Mm-hmm.
that's great. But as Jeff says, there are some athletes out there who could probably perform better if they shed a
Yeah.
little bit of weight.
And
Yeah.
I don't work with athletes that have eating disorders. Like if they have an
Mm-hmm.
active eating disorder, I refer them out to a sports dietitian that is experienced in that area. I don't work with youth athletes. So now part of my
Mm-hmm.
application, I ask, are you 18 years or older?
Mm.
Because if they check no, then I'm like, yeah, you're getting sent off to a dietitian that does work with youth. I have a very specific type of athlete that we like to work with, and if you're not the right fit for me, then it's just like this gut feeling. It doesn't feel like something that we can be like the best fit for, so I will usually refer out to other dietitians. But if you're an adult, you're looking to improve performance, you're struggling with things, maybe energy levels, or maybe you're training more than ever and you're feeling like you're eating well, but you're seeing the scale go up, that's the time to come and have us help you navigate that and create an eating pattern that's very sustainable for you, that's personalized to your unique lifestyle, so that you can feel your best, train well, stay healthy, and feel strong and lean.
I think I've had a lot of I've had so many different experiences with this as a coach. I have athletes come to me, and part of their triathlon journey or their endurance journey is about losing the weight. Like
Yeah, that's why they got into it. Yeah.
that's where they got into it. They started to run, or then now they're adding on biking and swimming. And I respect that. I mean, good for them. Like they're really
Mhm.
trying to do something about this and make themselves healthier adults. And then I also have had athletes on absolutely the other end of the spectrum, where I've been the one to identify through just watching and listening and all that disordered eating, and had to
Mm.
have that conversation with them about, we need to talk about this, right? We need to really,
Yeah.
I can't help you with this, but you need to
Yeah.
go and talk to somebody about this, right? And then the third bucket is people who come to me who have been working through disordered eating for a long time, for years, and just managing that in an open conversation with them in terms of training and fueling, etc. And I do feel like sometimes I could use a little help here. Doing the
Yeah.
best I can. And I think the other piece, which I'm so happy you referred to, is as coaches, we can't see what they're eating morning, noon, and night, right? And so we can
Mhm.
give general advice or general thoughts, but to have someone who like you or people similar to you who are really helping them track everything and creating healthy habits, it's much more than we can do. And so while it is an added expense and some athletes can't always manage that all the way through their triathlon journey, I do feel, and I know that Jeff feels the same way, it's a great learning experience as an athlete to retain a dietitian for a block of time to learn how to do this, because a lot of times I think even very smart, educated, bright adults are like, oh,
It's different
yeah,
to fuel yourself as an athlete than it is just like an everyday person. Like you do have heightened needs. You do have to navigate timing of things to really optimize for performance, prevent GI issues. There's lots of like different things that we have to navigate. And for us, I think of us as an investment, a short-term investment with like long-term gains, right? Like you're in this program for 4, 6, 8 months, somewhere in there. But our goal is always to get you to the point where you can do this on your own beyond our program. It's not a like lifelong thing that you're in, like working with us. If you're still with us in 2 years, like we suck at our job. And we don't, honestly, we don't
right,
want to work with you for that long. Like we love
right,
you
right.
guys, but our goal is to provide you with the skills and tools and clarity in how to fuel for your lifestyle so you can have that with you for however long you want to do triathlon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's awesome.
It, when you think about what people spend on tech and on gear and
Oh
everything
yeah.
else, this is like an investment in yourself.
Yeah.
And one of
Yeah.
the things that
Instead
we
of buying
talked
a new
about
bike,
before.
let's first get your
Yeah,
nutrition underway so then you can
exactly.
really just be an absolute beast on that new
Yeah.
bike that
Beast.
you
That's
enjoy.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you both for a very interesting conversation on a fraught topic. And I want to take a moment to thank Justin again for submitting the question. And if you have a question that you'd like for us to answer on the podcast, I hope that you'll send it in. You can reach me by email at tri_doc@icloud.com, or you could submit your question, as many have, as I believe Justin submitted this one, on the TriDoc podcast private Facebook group, which you can find on that platform by searching for TriDoc Podcast. Answers the 3 easy questions. If you're not already a member, we'll grant you admittance, and you can join the conversation there. Submit your questions. If you have any comments about this particular segment, I hope that you will submit your comments there so that Alex, Juliet, and I can answer them and see them and open up a conversation there about
I
your
am in
thoughts
the
on
Facebook group
diet.
now. Last
I
time I
am
That's
think I was
right.
on
too.
She
here, you were
is.
like,
Indeed.
Alex, are
Yeah.
you in the Facebook group? I was like, no, I'm
Yeah.
not. So now I am.
She is now. Thank you both for being here. And Juliet, I will see you again in a couple of weeks for the next medical mailbag. Alex, I will have the link to Alex Larson Nutrition as well as to the trailer to her podcast in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here again, Alex. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My guest on the podcast today is Maia Watson. Maia is an aspiring professional triathlete who lives in Victoria, British Columbia. She has burst onto the scene of the 70.3 circuit with overall wins at Victoria and Oregon this year, and she's looking to make her professional debut at a race in the near future, although she first needs to deal with some injury issues. Currently, she is working for VinFast, one of the major sponsors of Ironman, and she does so as an executive assistant to the corporate national sales team. And in her former life, she ran cross country and track at McGill University, my very own alma mater that is found in Montreal, Quebec. But for now, she is joining me from Victoria. Maia, welcome to the TriDoc podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Maia, you really have come on to the triathlon scene with aplomb. I got a chance to race against you last October, where I want all the listeners to know I beat her by 2 seconds. And it'll never happen again, but I'm going to forever keep that on my palmarès that I beat Maia by 2 seconds. It's a very exciting moment for me. But Maia, you weren't always a triathlete. This is a very kind of recent thing for you. How did you get to multisport?
I dabbled in it when I was about 5, 6 years old because I came from a family of multi-sport. I remember doing the kids' triathlons just here in Victoria, BC. And growing up, I tried all the different sports, but I kept doing swim club on the side. And I always loved to run. I was super competitive in all the local cross country meets. I was just starting it from a young age. I think I always had the skills in my back pocket. But I actually stopped triathlon probably when I was 13 because I didn't want to do swim club anymore. And just continued to play soccer through high school and did a little bit of track and field. And then I went to McGill University and I decided to walk on to the cross country team, or try to walk on, I should say, and just made the cut, honestly. But I'm really grateful they did. And I had an amazing 4 years running for the McGill track and cross country team and just focusing on single sport. But where the triathlon comes into play is it's most young runners experience. They get injuries. So I would text my dad, who's a coach, and say, "What do I do now?" And he would write me a spin bike program, or he would tell me to go swim in the pool for 1 kilometer. And essentially, the and then every summer I would go home from university, and he would put me on a triathlon program to get me all healthy to go to school again in the fall and race cross country, and where I would just get injured again.
It's really it's a common theme. I had a chance to
Yeah.
talk to Tamara Jewett, who ran track at University of Toronto and was very
Oh,
successful,
yeah.
except that she continuously was getting injured. Now, for her, a big part of her injuries were related to just nutrition. And this seems to be a problem for a lot of female athletes. They are pressured either by coaches or just internal forces to think that they need to lose weight to be faster, that they don't eat well, and it leads to a lot of injuries. Did you have that as part of the issue, do you think, that led to injury? Or was it just running is injury prone?
Yeah, I my very first year of school, I had a big jump in volume from high school, and that in conjunction with honestly being a first year student and not knowing how to manage my schedule, I was probably going out to party a little too much and not sleeping enough. But in conjunction, we also didn't really have any awareness of nutrition when I came into to university, and there was no one telling me what red S is in sports. So I actually ended up in Reds in my second year of university, pretty much just from lack of awareness of how to properly fuel my body. And so that was a pretty tough awakening. I remember burning out near the end of the year of my second track season. Sorry, a bit of a word jumble there, and just not really knowing what was going on. I definitely, in all honesty, I did struggle with some body image issues. I gained some weight from the res food, and so I think there was a bit of a storm going on. I probably started to think a little bit more about what I was eating. And then there was a bit of a lack of education on what it is. So I probably did fall into the trap of less is more, the less is more mindset. Whether that related to my injuries, I don't know. Probably a bit. I was in Reds for only a short period of time before I had a bit of a awakening call. One of the UVic coaches. So I came home during COVID to run, and I trained with the UVic team. That's University of Victoria. And the head coach there, she interviewed me essentially and was like, "What is your BMI?" Like, very straightforward. And she was like, "You are underweight. I think you're in reds. Like, here's a nutritionist. Let's get you healthy." And from there on, I just went up. Well, maybe a bit of a different story to Tamara Jewett. I maybe just made a lot of, I just was dumb about it all, but also there was a lack of education around it. Yeah,
That's really interesting. So the move to UVic, so the coach at McGill, man or woman?
man.
Yeah, and I think it's just all too common that male coaches are not attuned enough to helping their female
Hmm.
athletes avoid
Hmm.
this problem. I think there's so much, and that's not necessarily to disparage your coach, but rather just to say that male coaches, especially working with female athletes, are under so much scrutiny and under so much, there's so many lines that can be so easily crossed and get them into trouble. And so I think that male coaches have become really scared of getting too invested with their female athletes and asking
Hmm.
questions that could be construed as the wrong
Hmm.
way. And then you have a female coach who isn't burdened by any of that and feels immediately, hey, I'm just going to get cut to the chase. As a coach myself, but as a physician, I don't feel encumbered because in my regular job, I have to ask these questions all the time. And so
Totally.
it's easier. I'm more comfortable asking those kinds of questions of my female athletes. I don't work with any young female athletes like yourself, but if I did, I would always make menstrual history a huge component
Mhm.
of training with them and making sure that we're getting adequate nutrition to keep a good menstrual calendar and things like that. So I think it's really interesting that you point out that moving temporarily from a male coach to a female coach, she immediately saw the problem, immediately helped you fix it, and raised
Yeah.
your awareness. What
But
would
I
be
was
your
also sorry, I was gonna say I was also willing. I was ready. I wanted to be healthy. I just didn't really know what was going on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
So
no, that's
it definitely
huge, right?
differs between people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and Tamara has been very honest about the fact that she had eating disorder, and she I
Yeah.
think she started with disordered eating, and it went into a full-fledged eating disorder, and if you have an eating disorder, then the kind of approach your coach employed is not gonna work, but with
Yeah.
you, obviously, you were the right person for it to work with. So, what
Yeah.
would be your advice to other women who are in endurance sport, young women, and what would you say to someone like that that you want to be sure they don't run into these problems?
Oh, that's a good question. What I would have told probably my younger self is less is not more. More is probably just enough, honestly. There's so many risks to underfueling, but essentially no risks to overfueling as an athlete. And I also think just to be very mindful, no, like intuitive eating, but while also being mindful of what your body actually needs. And that's the approach I take. Like I listen to my cravings and what yeah, like what I feel like, but I'm also if I just finished a 4-hour bike session and I'm not hungry, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make myself eat something that's easy to eat. So it's a balanced approach, and I think when you find that balanced approach, you find a lot of peace with fueling.
I like that. I like that sort of thought process. What would you advise coaches, especially male coaches who are working
Mm,
with female athletes? What sort of kernel of advice would you give them to either look out for or to help them feel more comfortable approaching their women athletes and be able to guide them?
I think being able to have conversations with the female athletes, but in a safe space. You never want to expose a single female athlete in front of other female athletes. So I think if you have that conversation in a safe space, the woman might be able to be a little bit more vulnerable through what they're feeling or experiencing.
Yeah, it's so
Or
fraught.
that's how I would have reacted, right?
Yeah, it's so fraught, right? It's such
Yeah,
a fraught conversation because there are so
yeah,
many things to think about and how to approach it in a way that everybody's going to take it the right way and have it be a positive sort of conversation. It's an ongoing challenge, I'm sure, for women in sport and for coaches all around.
yeah. There's a lot more awareness now coming out. We're not where we need to be, but what I've seen a lot of shift in just the last 5 years.
You mentioned a little bit earlier your dad. I think I want to spend a little bit of time just getting a sense of his impact on your early sporting success and your current success. So, for anybody who hasn't made the connection, Maya's dad is Lance Watson. Lance Watson is, of course, the Olympic coach of Matt Sharp and Simon Whitfield, the gold medalist, the twice medalist, actually, from the Canadian Olympic team. And he is also the owner and my boss at Life Sport Coaching. But how amazing is that to grow up with such an accomplished individual as your dad? How did he inform your progress through endurance sport? And how is he informing your progress through triathlon?
So growing up, my dad just wanted me to try all the different sports, and I really respect that. He never told me from a young age that I need to be a triathlete. Of course, he hinted that I would be a really good triathlete, but so I tried it. I dabbled in it, like I said earlier. But my dad didn't really start playing a key part in my triathlete development until university, like I mentioned. When I feel like the tables turned a little bit. And instead of him putting me in sport, I was saying, "Hey, Dad, can you please help me out with my training plan, with my injuries? I just want to get healthy." And then eventually, when I wanted to do my first sprint triathlon in, I think it was like 2021 or something, I was like, "Can you please write my training plan for that?" And he helped get me there, and it was really special. And he even came out and watched. It was in Montreal. It was the Sprint World Champs. I think that was 2021. Yeah, but he came out and he supported me, and it was just amazing. And that's when I really made the switch into multi-sport, and that's when he really started actually being my coach. And a lot of people always ask me, it's probably the most commonly received question is, what's it like having your dad as your coach? And in my case, it's awesome. He knows me like better than anyone else, to be honest. And been around me since I was literally born. He's seen me at my lows, he's seen me at my highs. And but why I think it really works is he really takes a holistic approach to coaching, or at least to my coaching. And the way he schedules my year is very much so I can have balance. in my year. He encourages me to go on vacations. He encourages me to have some fun. But he also is my biggest supporter when it comes to training and racing. And I always get really excited to text him after I nail a training session because he's the one who wrote it, right? Yeah, it's awesome.
That's cool. I had a conversation recently with Mark Cullen, who you said you had met previously.
Yeah.
And one of the things I asked him was what it was like coaching his wife and whether or not that engenders any kind of conflict around the dinner table. And are there ever times when Coach Lance needs to call athlete Maia and say, "Hey, Maia, you slacked off in that workout. I need you to pick it up a little bit." And how does athlete Maia respond to Coach Lance in those situations? Coach Lance, who happens to be dad.
Coach Dad. That's what I call him. I'll say, "Hey, Coach Dad." I actually cannot remember the last time we had conflict around training. Maybe when I was 14 years old and didn't want to go to swim club. Yeah, it's really changed. If anything, he is reeling me in a little bit. I want to do more, and he's, "No, don't do that extra kilometer. You don't need another swim this week." And that's the extent of it. Yeah.
That's great. That's the kind of coaching relationship I think we should all aspire to.
I
So
feel really lucky.
at this point in your career, what do you consider your strengths and what do you consider your weaknesses?
I think my strengths as of recently has been biking. I've put in a lot of work in the bike last year, in part because of issues with injuries and running. I've seen a really big jump in my power output across races. I think when it comes to like just sports positives and weaknesses, like my swim needs a lot of work still to get to the professional level. I'm chipping away at it, and I'm able to jump in with local swim groups here, and it's been helping a ton. Also, a weakness is definitely, yeah, like my body hasn't adjusted to the volume of training required to be a successful 70.3 athlete. So I've been dealing with a lot of probably like biomechanical issues and little injuries here and there, and I'm actually down with E-band syndrome right now. So it's been pretty frustrating, but yeah, I'm lucky to have good people in my corner to help me stay positive, like my dad and my friends. Yeah.
Yeah. What have been some of the kind of bigger stepping stones that have helped you get to where you are? Everybody needs, obviously, your dad's been a huge one. Has there been anything else that's given you the push that helped you find the success?
Yeah. First of all, success in running. That started at McGill. I had a great coach named Luke Moran. He's actually also a triathlon coach, but he wasn't doing my triathlon coaching. And he was an awesome mentor the first few years of school. Um, Kyla Rollinson, coach in Quebec in Montreal, has been an amazing female coach supporter for me. I was sad to leave her when I left Montreal. And then recently I was put onto that triathlon life development team, and that has opened up a whole community of people for me that have been super supportive. And Paul and Eric have been great mentors.
That's great. And what are your aspirations for the future? I know that you're champing at the bit to turn pro. What are your kind of hopes and dreams for the short and medium term?
So short term hopes and dreams are to be able to just be healthy again and train. It's been pretty tough right now, not being able to get on my bike at all or anything. Medium term, definitely to switch to professional racing. I feel excited and I feel ready to do that now. I feel like I proved to myself in my Oregon performance that I'm ready to compete against those women. So that's a really exciting prospect for me to train towards.
And do you think 70.3 is your sweet spot? Is there any aspirations to race shorter or even longer?
I love shorter races. I actually think I'm pretty talented at the standard distance. Probably draft illegal, not draft legal. Can't swim well enough for that. But there's just less opportunities for that. But I think it'd be fun to do St. Anthony's. Is it next year? Also, my body recovers better from that distance, at least at this age.
So
And then
no aspirations for the Olympics.
no, I gotta be realistic here.
Okay. And then longer, would you ever consider an Ironman?
Like it's a seed that's been planted in my brain, and I'm super inspired by those athletes who can do an Ironman, and I would absolutely love to do one day. My body needs to be able to handle even just 70.3 training at this point. So yeah, maybe ask me again in 5 years.
Yeah. Do you have any But you mentioned Paula, but are there any other people in the pro ranks? Obviously, through your dad, you've probably got access to people. Is there anybody that you have been speaking to or reaching out to as someone to, I don't know, plan your entry into the pro ranks? When I think about turning pro, it's obviously something that would never in a million years have been able to do, and it's not something that's in my future. But I just imagine it's daunting going from a top age grouper to now it's a whole new world. Have you reached out to anybody? Are you talking to anyone who's trying to help you to navigate this?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken a bit to Brent McMahon, who my dad coached literally Brent's entire career, and he's been super reassuring and helpful. I've talked to Matt Sharp a little bit too, just super positive guy. A few of the athletes on the TTL development team are lovely, and a few of them, actually one woman just started her first year pro this year, so I picked her brain a little bit on it. Yeah, it's daunting, but I'm excited and I'm okay with getting my ass kicked. I think it's all part of the process.
Do you see this as a lot of people go pro knowing that they're just going to spend their career getting their ass kicked, but I don't see that in you. I see you as somebody who aspires to be at the top. So what do you see this as at least a kind of short to moderate term like career? Is this something you're going to invest in full time at some point, or do you think this will just be as long as it's fun, I'm going to keep doing it?
I think with both of those mindsets. I'm not going to do triathlon unless it's fun. Like that actually is probably my number one goal. I'm like, this needs to be fun, but I also am, I'm a pretty competitive driven person and I want to see where I can take it. So I think if the more success I have, which I hopefully will have, the more maybe life decisions I'll make to support the triathlon lifestyle. Yeah. So I'm just seeing where it goes one step at a time right now.
And we've talked a lot about your dad, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the fact that your mom is also, she was an elite runner. Am I
Yeah.
right in saying she ran for Canada in international competitions?
Yeah, she was the top runner in Canada for a decade, probably.
Oh, only a decade, and somehow I didn't know this. So
I don't have her genetics.
you're coming from some pretty good genetics. What's that been like? How has she informed your training? How has she informed your career?
Oh my gosh, my mom is like the most chill, easygoing woman ever, which maybe is counterintuitive to what you hear about a lot of professional female runners. But from a young age, she's always just been ridiculously supportive of whatever I want to do. I was a musical theater kid all through high school, and she was like, "This is amazing. Keep doing this." She's been amazing pivoting back to triathlon. She's amazing with the psychological help. With my injury right now, just being able to talk to her, she is so supportive and just she can completely empathize, right? Because she's been through it all herself. So she's amazing on the mental side. My dad probably he has more of the coaching, the training structure, but my mom is like my built-in therapist, honestly.
That's great. That's good to have that so accessible. I think most of us would be thrilled most of us pay for that kind of stuff, and you just got it right in the house. So that's pretty nice.
I'm so grateful for it though. Like I do not take it for granted. Yeah, I feel really lucky.
So if all goes according to plan, St. Anthony's would be on your calendar potentially. Do you have anything
Yeah.
else planned, or are you just going to see how it goes?
If I do get another race in this year, it'll probably be at Indian Wells. If I'm healthy, like the plan right now is just to get healthy and then choose a race. In my back of my mind, I'm like, Indian Wells, that's a few months away, still have time, and it might be a good race to do my pro debut at as well. 2025, I have no idea yet, except for St. Anthony's.
Awesome. You got time. You're all of 24 years old. So we can look forward to watching you for quite a while. Maia, I can't thank you enough for being here. It's been a lovely conversation. I am
Thank
very
you.
excited to see you in person. I don't know when that will be, but hopefully sooner rather than later. Maia Watson is an aspiring professional triathlete. She has overall women's age group wins at Victoria and Oregon this year. And we are all looking forward to seeing her back on course, hopefully at Indian Wells this December. Maia, thanks again for being here on the TriDoc podcast.
Thanks for having me. It was so much fun.
My name is Stephanie Van Bever, and I am a proud Patreon supporter of the TriDoc podcast. The TriDoc podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Sankoff, along with his amazing interns, Cosette Rhodes and Nina Takashima. You can find the show notes for everything discussed on the show today, as well as archives of previous episodes at www.tridocpodcast.com. Do you have questions about any of the issues discussed on this episode? Or do you have a question for consideration to be answered on a future episode? Send Jeff an email at try_doc@icloud.com. If you're interested in coaching services, you really should please visit tridoccoaching.com or lifesportcoaching.com, where you can find a lot of information about Jeff and the services that he provides. You can also follow Jeff on the TriDoc Podcast Facebook page, TriDoc Coaching on Instagram, and the TriDoc Coaching YouTube channel. And don't forget to join the TriDoc Podcast private Facebook group. Search for it and request to join today. If you enjoy this podcast, and I hope you do, I hope you will consider leaving a rating and a review, as well as subscribe to the show wherever you download it. And of course, there is always the option of becoming a supporter of the podcast at patreon.com/TriDoc Podcast. The music heard at the beginning and the end of the show is Radio by Empty Hours, and it's used with permission. This song and many others like it can be found at www.reverbnation.com, where I hope that you will visit and give small, independent bands a chance. The TriDoc Podcast will be back again soon with another medical question and answer and another interview with someone in the world of multisport. Until then, train hard, train healthy.